The Vigilant Church of God presents Michael Venish, bringing you the plain truth about what God says to the shepherds. And now, Michael Venish.
Greetings, friends and brethren around the world. Here we have an illustration or an image of the temple of God. The temple which Jesus Christ came to, that temple which was made out of wood, stone, and precious metals. The temple Jesus Christ came to. And here we have an illustration of the altar representing Christ's ministry. The ministry who is supposed to teach the church of God the doctrines and the truth of God. They did that, but yet, whether we like it or not, the church of God is in the Laodicean era. The Philadelphia era, with its open door to preach the gospel to the world, stopped when its messenger, Herbert W. Armstrong, died on January the 16th, 1986. Today we have a conglomeration of gospels being preached by various leaders of scattered churches of God, men who did not listen to Herbert Armstrong when he was alive. Notice what he said in a worldwide news dated March the 6th, 1981. I think that when God lets me die, the thing He's called me for to do will have been completed, preparing the way for the second coming of Christ, carrying that gospel of the kingdom to the world for a witness to all nations. Of course, we know that's Matthew 24, verse 14. But the job God has called me to do is a prophesied job. It has been being done. Yes, my friends and brethren, that is exactly what it was. A prophesied job. Mr. Armstrong, contrary to some critics and distractors, led a dynamic work, reaching every nation on the face of this earth. Mr. Armstrong went on to say, "But I think God has called me for a job to do. If I have been someone in the power and the spirit of Elijah," remember, there is no prophecy that God will have an Elisha following Elijah. There is no one in the church that has the qualifications, the experience that could carry on the work that God has given me to do. Who is there among you who can do it? If you will tell me, I would like to know, said Mr. Herbert Armstrong. Yet soon after his death, ministers who heard him, ministers who sat there and listened to him say those very words, started to rise among the brethren, claiming titles and claiming to follow in his footsteps. Some even saying they're fulfilling the grand pattern that Mr. Armstrong was supposed to have set as an example. Did he? We may ask. Why did Mr. Armstrong say there is no one in the church that has the qualifications, the experience that could carry on the work that God had given him to do? Well, it's very simple, my dear brethren and friends. Jesus Christ called him to do that job and no one else. These men claiming to lead a work of God are charlatans. Jesus Christ allowed Mr. Armstrong to die so that the final age of Laodicea would be ushered in through an apostasy. Yet it's carrying on today. Notice again a quote from Mr. Armstrong, this time a letter dated March the 19th, 1981. But just in case of my disability for any reason, to prevent Satan from causing division, I feel God has inspired me to delegate power to the advisory council during any such complete disability, to take full charge of the work and all its assets and activities. The church must not be scattered. It must not become scattered because there is no competent Christ-chosen spiritual shepherd to become meat for beasts, human, of the field. See Ezekiel 34 verse 5. This is a safeguard for your protection, Mr. Armstrong said. Did the leading ministers and the others heed this warning? The falling away from the truth, from the doctrines Christ restored through Mr. Armstrong, led to a time exactly as prophesied in Ezekiel 34 verse 5, which Mr. Armstrong quoted. And they were scattered because there is no shepherd, and they became meat to all the beasts of the field when they were scattered. Jesus Christ led Mr. Armstrong to say those prophetic words. Notice also, the church must not be scattered. But did they listen? Did they listen to Mr. Armstrong? In Jeremiah 23 verse 1, woe be unto the pastors that destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture, says the Lord. Therefore thus says the Lord God of Israel against the pastors that feed my people. You have scattered my flock and driven them away, and have not visited them. Behold, I will visit upon you the evil of your doing, says the Lord. The Apostle Paul said in Acts 20 verses 29 to 30, For I know this, that after my departing shall grievous wolves enter in among you, not sparing the flock. Also of your own selves shall men arise, speaking perverse things to draw away disciples after them. And today we have that going on among the ministry of God's church. Perversity is being preached. Yes, a distortion of the truth. Corrupt messages that turn brethren away from Jesus Christ. These individuals, wolves among the sheep, are insensitive to the needs of the flock. You know what Paul said in Acts 20 goes hand in hand with 2 Peter chapter 2 verses 1 to 3. But there were false prophets also among the people, even as there shall be false teachers among you, who privately shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying the Lord that brought them, and bringing upon themselves swift destruction. And many shall follow their pernicious ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. And through covetousness, that's extortion, shall they with vain words make merchandise of you. Many of these ministers use the name of Herbert Armstrong and the government of God to keep their members in their respective churches. Yet they are denying Jesus Christ by what he inspired his apostle of the Philadelphia era to teach, Herbert Armstrong. They deny the sanctity of marriage. They allow interracial marriage. They teach Jesus' genealogy was not of a pure racial strain. They allow women to wear makeup. They celebrate birthdays, and they allow divorce and remarriage. Oh, just give them 6 months and you can remarry again. In a lengthy worldwide news article of June the 24th, 1985, titled Recent History of the Philadelphia Era of the Worldwide Church of God, Mr. Armstrong said the following. I quote now from a memorandum by Leroy Neff, the current treasurer, who was on the first doctrinal research committee and wrote concerning others on the committee. I am quoting this to give an example of the direction some of the liberals of the doctrinal committee were taking. And that's happening today, dear brethren. 1. Any marriage where the people are unconverted or did not fully know what they were getting into was not valid, they say. It was not a valid marriage. 2. Polygamy was tacitly approved by God in the Old Testament times. So multiple marriages or divorces in modern times might just be a form of polygamy by adding wives sequentially rather than concurrently. 3. God divorced ancient Israel, and then both parties were free to marry or free to remarry. 4. The ministry should be able to loose marriages that God had joined. These liberals wanted complete freedom in the church for divorce and remarriage at will, Mr. Armstrong said. And he continues. Other questions raised by the liberals were complete freedom for any type of marriage. Some more, some less. Freedom to modify church teachings on healing by direct prayer, as in James 5 verse 14. freedom for women in facial makeup, and even the approvement of celebrating birthdays, never approved in the Bible, and even of voting in elections as part of the world. You know, brethren, in 1 Timothy 4 verse 1, Paul wrote the following: "Now the Spirit speaks expressly that in the latter times, our time, some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, speaking lies in hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron." We will continue with what God says to the shepherds of his flock next time. This is Michael Venish saying, goodbye, friends.
For more information about this ministry, please write to The Vigilant Church of God, Post Office Box 280, Kannapolis, North Carolina 28083.